The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Was, of course, Julian Assange, one of the last times he was out in the sun and free at an anti-war rally, I believe in 2010, 2011. He has been ensconced for 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy and now 3 years in the dungeon at Belmarsh. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly. Assange Countdown to Freedom, a very special edition. They've all been special lately, but today is extremely special because we are on the cusp of a possible signature by the British Home Secretary, Priti Patel, that would send Julian Assange into this country. That guy that you saw, folks, or you heard at the very top of the show, that gentle, that careful, that beautiful voice, that beautiful individual, that peaceful individual, anti-violent individual is sitting in a jail cell for 3 years now. Now I'm getting to the point where I'm completely pissed off that this continues, this persecution, this torture continues. 5 years we've been doing this show and the situation continues. I'm going to talk to his father today, his brother, and the greatest whistleblower in U.S. history, Daniel Ellsberg, will be here to talk about the greatest journalists in the last century, Julian Assange. We're going to take a quick break and come back with Daniel Ellsberg, Gabriel Shipton, and Julian's father, John Shipton, after just a quick 30-second piece. Okay, I don't know where to start, folks. I am Randy Credico. This is Live on the Fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom. Pretty special gentleman. And later on, like Mr. Ellsberg, we have a Harvard student graduate that's going to be on, who's organizing an event tomorrow in at Harvard University because the Attorney General Merrick Garland is giving the commencement speech there. And so we have some college action. Not enough in this country, but at least we're seeing it now. And this guy, Michael, will be, Miccioli, will be joining us later in the show. And I want to thank you, John. I know, John, that you have only so much time. Looks like it's very cold there wherever you are with that hat on. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's winter here. You're in the midst of a summer, and we'll join you, I gather, around about June 9th for a couple of weeks, so we'll look forward to taking my hat off and saying hello.
Yes. Leave that hat behind, please.
It has the badge on it, don't extradite Assange. That's why I wear it.
Oh, I see. Then bring the hat and the badge, and I'll wear it here.
But I just like to, I have to catch the plane. I just like to postulate three things rather quickly. One is that Daniel Ellsberg's Pentagon Papers publication brought to conclusion, or brought an end to the Vietnam War. It couldn't any longer be supported. In the cables, a particular cable which addresses the cable from the US ambassador in Baghdad to the Department of State in Washington, describes the murder of a family by US Marines and the US soldiers rather, and calling in an airstrike to obliterate all memory of that family from the earth. This particular cable was read by the parliamentarians in Iraq and the bureaucrats and the people of Iraq, and that brought an end to the Iraq War because the Parliament of Iraq refused to sign the Status of Forces Agreement. So that's two. The third one is that we have a man, David McBride, Major David McBride, is a lawyer in the Australian Army, did a release of the, actually pursued the matter within the Army, and the Army ignored it, and then released the details of Australian soldiers murdering Afghan farmers. And that brought about Australia's end to its involvement in the Afghanistan war. So I'd like to just illuminate the real great importance of these leaks, that they bring ends to wars and can bring about peace. It's no lightweight matter. It's treated as though it's just a leak. It is not. It is the bringing about the conclusion of the involvement in war, and consequently the movement towards peace, and saving many, many lives thereby.
Let me ask you, you are now, John, moving around, you know, for your son. You have been for years now, and you're coming to the U.S. And to continue this crusade. Obviously, your son has exposed war crimes, torture, and all sorts of government and corporate misdeeds. Will Daniel, I'm going to go to you. Will that bring these wars to an end? I mean, a conclusion? Will we finally actually get out of Iraq? Will we get out of Somalia? Will we not, you know, get involved in what people are calling a proxy war in Eastern Europe?
Yes, it does seem to be a proxy war between two nuclear-armed superpowers, with the real possibility then of enlarging the war, continuing indefinitely, with a continuous risk of enlargement and possible escalation to a nuclear war, which I'm sorry to say, the Russians, outrageously, I would say, have been, can you hear me? Have been raising the issue of nuclear war steadily in a way that we really haven't seen explicitly for a very long time. Even though the U.S. has made many such threats in the past, very often they've been private, and obviously none were carried out for various reasons. Some, I think, were bluffs and some were not bluffs. And the reasons differ in almost every case as to why it didn't come about. I think we were very close to it a number of times. Regrettably, no U.S. president has been willing to adopt the posture of policy of no first use, of committing ourselves never to initiate nuclear war. And that is now facing us, an imitation of those threats on which NATO was founded, by the way, always been founded on the idea of initiating nuclear war if necessary, never ruling it out. And in that context of virtually 70 years now, we're facing such threats by the Russians if, for example, if we were to put U.S. troops, and which no president is eager to do, but even U.S. planes at somewhat lesser risk, explicitly into the conflict, U.S. cruise missiles explicitly, we're facing the threat that that might lead against us to a kind of tactical nuclear warfare, which would almost surely escalate to threaten all humanity, most of it dying in a nuclear winter caused by a major nuclear war. So I think the public has never actually, to this day, really been brought to recognize what was behind, what underlay these threats, in effect, as to what would happen if the U.S. had carried out over Berlin or over Cuba or various other circumstances, carried out the threats we were prepared to carry out. That would have meant the annihilation of Europe in the first place, and ultimately, we now know, of most people on Earth. So the U.S. and NATO and Russia, now joining them explicitly, hold the entire world hostage to possible near annihilation over a conflict initially between us. So far, I'm glad to say neither side has actually carried out such threats. It will be catastrophic if they do. But the public has never really been allowed to know, either in public hearings or by leaks, which I intended to make and wasn't able to carry through entirely, of what was being threatened here. Something I think which no one has the right to, no power, no person has the right, has been expressed by all the U.S. presidents and by the Russian presidents with currently right now by Putin, to say, if you do X, Y, or Z, we will start a process that will annihilate near everybody. In short, I wish there were a Chelsea Manning or a Snowden and an Assange to print their revelations that would make clear just how dire these plans that actually exist and the readiness that exists are for public. I can't guarantee that that revelation would have a major effect. I'd have to disagree a little with John, my friend here, that the Pentagon Papers, the revelations of history in those, actually led to the end of the war. It didn't. The war continued after the Pentagon Papers came out. But the threat to the president, that his own threats, nuclear threats in Vietnam, Nixon's nuclear threats, might be revealed by me with documents, led him to take crimes against me to shut me up. And that, in fact, when those were exposed and acted on, that made it possible for the war to end.
Right. You know what? I just want to jump in here. It was the beginning. John, I agree with John. I kind of agree with you as well. But it was the beginning, those revelations. And,
it was a link in a chain of events.
Right.
That actually
I would say that the public support for a lot of these wars, and we're going to play, because I have a lot here. There's a lot to play here, and John's got to get a play in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and play this, and what kind of influence, I'm going to ask you, John, I'm going to ask all three of you, what kind of influence did this video, and I always play it, and I'm going to play it again, Collateral Murder. I'm going to go to you, John, first after this. What kind of impact did it have on the public conscience? Do you have that set, Kelly? Kelly Lane.
Master Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene, looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons.
Let me engage you.
Hey, we need to stop that so we can get down there. We need to stop that. You see my look?
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1-8, request permission to engage.
I'm picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
We're taking him.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1-8, engage. Clear.
Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
John, that video, that
Well,
great piece of reporting.
the revulsion felt by people everywhere. 20 million times that video has been viewed on YouTube, plus the hundreds of millions that have seen the display when it first came out on the news broadcasts. The revulsion felt, it has created in America, in the United States, among people, welling up from people, not coming from above, but welling up from people, the assertion, endless wars. That's the understanding amongst people in the United States. The differentiation between the United States people and Washington's desires for world hegemony is distinct and noticeable when you travel around the United States, as Gabrielle and I did last year. That's one. The second is this began a process whereby the enculturation of the understanding of what the Iraq War actually was begun. And under Obama, as I mentioned, the Iraqi people, the Iraqi government refused the status of forces agreement, and the United States and its allies removed their troops from Iraq. That is, the war ended. History didn't end, the war ended, and the opportunity for renewal of Iraq began. Of course, we understand that the Washington fostered ISIS in order to continue the destabilization of Iraq. We understand that history didn't end, but the war ended. It brought an end to the war. Daniel's release of the Pentagon Papers, the Vietnam War was gigantic, vast, 500,000 soldiers there. The ending of that war would take years, a process that Daniel began, and it grew to the extent that the United States removed itself from Vietnam. The same in Afghanistan. For Australia, David McBride's revelations brought a significant doubt amongst the populace to our involvement in that war. And so the negotiations, the private negotiations between Australia and the United States and NATO began. And once they had begun, the conclusion for everybody was obvious, that the United States and NATO would remove themselves from Afghanistan. The war ended. History didn't end, but the war ended. And this is the opportunity for renewal. And each of these three cases is really important for us to understand the great value of Ellsberg, of Manning, of Assange, to the bringing about of peace in three areas of conflict.
Wow, that's very well said. I'll tell you something. I'm learning a lot tonight. I'm going to improve my word power between you and Daniel. I'm going to go to you. We haven't spoken yet. You haven't spoken yet. Gabriel Shipton, who's got a film out. We're going to play a clip of that, the trailer, in a minute. But I want to go back to that collateral murder. When you take a look at that, how indignant do you get knowing that your brother is in a dungeon, basically at the Tower of London, circa 1560, but on the ground floor and with a lot of noise around him? How indignant does that make you? And how do you continue? And knowing that the guys who did the killing there are still on the loose. They're out having a good time. Maybe, you know, they've been discharged or whatever, but they're not facing the music. And your brother has been. How does that affect you?
Well, you know, for me, how has it affected me? It's launched me on this, on this campaign of advocacy for Julian, which has also led me to campaign for people's right to know and things like that. So for me, that's what it's meant for me. Obviously, for Julian, it's a much worse situation. He's been in that prison for 3 years. He's not getting any better. The extradition to the US is looming. So for him, I think his situation is, it can't really be compared to. I think, what as John was saying, that these leaks and the effects they have over the years, and now and combined with what Daniel was saying, that we're on the brink of this, nuclear war. China launching ICBM test missiles, same with Russia testing their ICBMs. Like, this is, we're really on the precipice here, and with Julian imprisoned and this sort of he's been made an example of. What is happening now is, you cannot publish leaks. If you are leaking against the security state, against Washington and the security state, you will be put in prison forever. That's basically what the message is, and so it's particularly important right now that with the potential for a nuclear war, for Julian to be released, because the public needs these leaks to stop conflicts like this happening.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of information. We get gaslit. It's very confusing. There's a lot of hysteria around. You can't buy Stoli vodka. If I were still drinking, I couldn't. You can't listen to Tchaikovsky. I don't know what the hell's going. It's just the 50s to me, and I'll ask Daniel about that in a minute. But before I do, shortly, Daniel, I got to play a clip of this. Your situation, what you did, the revelations that you published were much bigger. About a 20-year conspiracy, a war that killed 1 million people, where Julian, was, I don't know how you would measure that to that. Just showing so much in Iraq and Afghanistan, but not a 20-year conflict that resulted in genocide, but you could basically call Iraq genocide. If you did what you did back then today, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair.
That's true. Is that a question? Yeah, I agree with you. That is the case. Julian, when you say, can you compare, I was facing 115 years in prison. Julian is facing 175. So there's been some inflation there, but it's not for the better for our freedom of the press. It is true that with the courts ruling the way they have in recent years, and especially with the current makeup of our Supreme Court, it's very unlikely that I would have escaped prison and still be in there, so facing a life sentence. By the way, I can't. I have to say something. As I look at John here on the screen, I'm seeing my father, because when I was eluding the FBI for 13 days with Patricia, putting out more copies of the Pentagon Papers to in all 19 different newspapers at a time, they couldn't interview me because I was, in effect, underground eluding the FBI. So they focused on my father in Michigan. And it was extremely comforting to me, heartwarming, to see that my father was backing me up the way that John is backing up Julian right now. And both, I would say, on the right side. They were saying the right things, true things. I had done what I should have done, I believe, and my father had the message, and John clearly has the message that we had not only were we their son, but that they were proud that we'd acted rightly and truthfully. So I want to congratulate John, but also congratulate Julian. One light thought in his confinement. There aren't very many that his half-brother and his father are being so active and energetic and eloquent in his support. I'm sure that is a fine thing for him, from my own experience.
Yes, and you can actually see. I've known John and I've known Gabriel for a couple of years. We broke bread upstate in Olive, New York, and had a lot of time together up there. And the home run for Assange when they were here last year. And hope I will see you guys very soon. But Gabriel has produced a film, directed a film. called Ithaka, that kind of chronicles John's work. And I guess you leave yourself out of it, Gabriel, because you're part of it as well. And Stella Morris's work on this crusade is called Ithaka. And this week on Australia TV, there'll be a 2-part series on it. They're going to take the whole film and cut it into 2. Gabriel will tell us the time, but let's take a look at a clip. This is a trailer from what is playing. It's not for the film premiere or whatever, but it's for what's playing in Australia. And here it is.
Julian Assange is the hero of our times.
My name is John Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's father.
The maximum sentence of 175 years because he published the truth.
I'm attempting to get Julian out of the.
If Julian is extradited,
free Julian.
He will be the first.
Free the press.
But not the last.
Free us all.
If he goes down, so will journalism.
Ithaka, a fight to free Julian Assange. June 7, ABC TV and ABC iView.
Wow, that looks great. Did I hear Daniel's voice in there?
I did.
Yes. Yeah. That's Daniel's voice. That's a grab from Democracy Now! Interview that you did, Daniel. And it's
John's got to leave soon. I hope that plane's delayed, John. So tell us your plans now and what your thoughts are, and are you optimistic, pessimistic, or you don't let that get in the way? You just keep moving like the ever-ready rabbit.
Yeah, like the ever-ready battery. You just keep on doing what comes in front of you. Otherwise, you get a bit down in the dumps. But we've done quite well in Australia, and the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, signed the petition to free Julian, or to bring Julian home to Australia. And we have now 30-odd members of the Assange Friendship Group in the Australian Parliament, and the constitution of the new Parliament has lots and lots of support for Julian. So now this raises the question, I'm always a little bit incendiary, I guess. Does Australia exist? The notion that we are sovereign, that we act in the interests of our citizens, and that consequently we cohere behind the government and help the government institute fair policy. So this is the question now that Australia must address. Do we actually exist? It is now entering the 14th year of arbitrary detention for Julian. 14 years, 3 years banged up in a maximum security prison in England. The rapporteur on torture report that Julian undergoes torture. The conspiracy between the Crown Prosecuting Service of the United Kingdom and the Swedish Prosecuting Authority to keep Julian, to keep him in the embassy. All the while, executives of government saying that Julian's free to leave any time he likes. It's like, as Nils Melzer describes it, sitting in a life raft, hopping out of the life raft into shark-infested waters. That's what it would be if Julian left the embassy, and that's demonstrated to us clearly. I think, Julian's fought
the conversation
court case after court case after court case. It's interminable. There's another one that come up. So now is the opportunity for the Australian government and its people, which support 76% of Australian people want Julian brought home. Now is the opportunity to demonstrate that Australia actually exists as a sovereign entity in the nations of the world.
Could I ask, does it look likely, as soon as I saw the word that the government had changed there in Australia, I felt hopeful. Is there not a basis for this? What what effect do you see that this new government will at last end the shameful neglect of the past Australian government of its own citizen there? It just ignored him, disowned him, in effect. Isn't there a reason to think that this new government should at last do the right thing by Julian?
Yes, Daniel. The strength, Gabrielle can address that a bit better. I got a dash for a plane. But the strength of the movement in support of Julian has brought about the election of 12 independents in the new parliament. Consequently, the independents can make or break the government of the day. So that's pretty clear that they must in some way bring about this disgrace that burdens Australia in the face of the world. Everywhere I go in the United States, we did 16 cities, always the question was asked, what's Australia doing? You know, we can see you two Australians wandering about the United States, but what is Australia doing? Well, we'll see in the very near future that the Australian government will act to bring the end to this disgraceful, arbitrary detention of a good man.
Yeah, that's right. We've seen
Go ahead.
So the future Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has made statements to his caucus when asked about Julian. He said he can't see why Julian is still in jail, and he said, you know, basically enough is enough in this case. The future, who we think is going to be the future Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, he issued a statement, last December when the High Court ruled in favour of the US, saying the similar things, that this has gone on long enough, and Julian should be released. So as John said, there's a big what we call a crossbench here now, which have no party affiliate, or have not affiliated with the major parties. So they will be able to support the Prime Minister and the Attorney General to sort of do the right thing and keep to their word and their promises and their past statements. Sorry, I
have to dash now. So
all right, John, I'll see you.
Bye, Randy. Bye, Daniel. And bye, Gabrielle.
I'll see you in New York or DC.
See you in.
All right.
Bye.
Sometime in June.
Bye.
All right. Bye. All right.
But we're always hopeful. I think when there's a new government, there is always this sense of hope. I think we had the same feeling when Biden was elected, that he would put a stop to this Trump administration, this Trump administration prosecution, but it just didn't happen. Like there was this sort of a couple of months. I remember we were there thinking, oh, they're gonna drop it. Garland's gonna do the right thing, and they sort of made a few moves. They stopped subpoenaing journalists' emails and things like that from the New York Times, but they didn't go as far as dropping the charges against Julian. So it's really up to us now to help this government, help this new government really support them to keep to their previous statements, which is what we've been doing. Yeah.
So if they would have to put the pressure on the U.S. government, do you think it's possible that that's part of the Five Eyes, that the Australian government could exert enough influence, Daniel, to get the UK or the US to drop the charges or not send him to the US in the UK's place?
That would be a new phenomenon here for a U.S. ally to be putting this kind of influence on the U.S. There's no question in my mind that Biden should have, when he came in, immediately simply dropped the extradition appeal and the request for extradition, and in fact should have dropped the charges against Julian. That's what he should have done. And it was not totally unrealistic, I think, to hope that he would do that. But a holdover from the Trump administration, actually in the Justice Department, actually renewed this appeal for his extradition after the judge in England had said that there was a basis for not extraditing Julian. And unhappily, Biden has continued with that. When you say, yes, it's right to bring pressure on Biden to do the right thing. I think that, after all, he was vice president in an administration under Obama that chose not to bring charges against Julian, haven't examined the question, on constitutional grounds, basically, that they didn't have a real basis, and there would be a violation, really, of the First Amendment. Certainly that would be claimed, and that would be right. The claim was right. It is clearly a violation to bring these charges of our First Amendment freedom of the press. So Obama didn't do it, actually. And Biden was vice president. So there was a reason to hope that when he came in, he would continue with the Obama policy here. But you can even think that if Trump hadn't, brought the charges, there's a basis to hope that Biden would not challenge the Constitution here by initiating them. But once they were there, I think there was reason to believe that Biden would not want to drop them. After all, when the first revelations were made by Julian Assange and the others that were cooperating with him, Biden's attitude, as I remember, was that Julian was a high-tech terrorist, which was obscene and absurd. And but that was the position he took, and not only he, of course, Hillary Clinton in particular made that.
Mitch McConnell as well said the same thing.
So here we have, he's a different party, but here we have both parties agreeing on this. By the way, something that I think deserves saying is that clip you've been showing, Randy, which the public does need to see very often. They can see it, remind them, on YouTube very easily. Just dial in
the whole thing.
Collateral Murder. Yeah, they can see an 18-minute version. And, with all the talk realistically based now of war crimes in Ukraine, which we are seeing. We're seeing the photographs on all the major, because they're done by somebody else, in fact, by the Russians. But what you're seeing in that film is a war crime. You are seeing a film in real reality, not reality TV, of a war crime being committed. In a war, by the way, which was as criminal and aggressive in Iraq as is Putin's invasion of Ukraine right now. Yes. So that the notion that we're facing somebody who can't be negotiated with because he's such a monstrous, unprecedented criminal here involves a total amnesia, not too hard, of the almost exactly same things that we have done in the past, which does not make them all right. They were criminal when we did them. They're criminal right now. But what nation said that it's impossible to negotiate with the U.S. because it's doing it? That would have as much basis. Well, it would not have been helpful. When I look back, I have no question. I wish that other nations had condemned the U.S. and sanctioned it and boycotted it and done various things in the same way that's happening now, right now, but and deserved it just as much. So a difference was that Russia, the other nuclear superpower, did not provide covert aid or proxy aid, did not make it a proxy war, interestingly, despite the fact of a close past relation with Iraq, by the way, and the fact that Iraq, even though it was run by a tyrant, by a dictator at that time, the people being killed and bombed in Iraq were being murdered. As a matter of fact, and the idea of giving them aid would have been as legitimate as the aid we are giving Ukraine right now. But I'm glad that Russia did not see fit to make it a nuclear crisis at that time. And the difference that we see right now in terms of the urgency of negotiation is not a difference in the victims, in the people being killed, actually on either side, but it is a difference that there's no question we are facing a prospect of nuclear war, which was not raised, thank God, in our aggression in Iraq or Afghanistan or otherwise. So it calls for a different approach here.
Yes.
And so, Daniel, if you were, if you were, working inside the military now, how would you, how would you leak that information? Where would you take if you had information that could, illuminate the current crisis and change the public's point of view in the current, Ukraine crisis? How would you? Where would you?
Well, there are various ways. WikiLeaks, of course, did offer itself as a channel for specifically that collateral murder. And my impression, by the way, is that much as it was seen by at that time, that Julian really concluded that maybe he should have gone to CNN or some other channel if they would run it at that time, get more coverage. And that's what led him to look for an alliance of other newspapers when he released evidence of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan later, as Chelsea Manning provided to him. Death squads, assassinations, torture definitely going on. So he didn't go just to the web. And I think that was right. So I would still go first. I would try, as Chelsea Manning did, to get the information out through the New York Times or the Washington Post. They both rejected it, as on some other occasions. So then he went to WikiLeaks. So WikiLeaks is there. The web is there, just generally. You don't have to go to WikiLeaks. The problem of being identified as the source is a semi-technical problem. Snowden felt, and Chelsea probably had the knowledge that they could have concealed their identity very effectively with what they knew technically. But my understanding on both of them is that, like myself, they didn't want other people blamed for this release, and Chelsea had intended to reveal herself. Snowden did reveal himself. But Assange might well have thought that in the United States, the First Amendment would protect him. I don't know how much he did think of relying on that, but it turns out not. And if he is successfully prosecuted, and that is upheld by the current Supreme Court, the First Amendment will have been annulled for so-called national security information.
I mean, Daniel, what I want to do right now, before you play this, Kelly, but there's a clip that she has of you. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because if they do bring him into this country, I know that the prosecution is going to try to limit the scope of the defense, where he can't bring up, there was a reason why he put these videos out and leaked or put out all the information. And during your trial at the beginning, I think it's just at the outset, what you said was going to happen if they continue with this trial, what the public was going to find out. We play this, Kelly. I want to ask you the difference today.
We won't stop the killing. Every week of this trial, like every week of the past 7 years, will be measured by new Hiroshimas and by new lies, by the deaths and imprisonment of Americans, and by tens of thousands of new Indo-Chinese killed, wounded, or made homeless. We won't stop that. But this trial will inform the American public in ways that it's never heard before of how we've been governed in the past quarter century and what censorship and deception do to a democracy.
Now, so I'm looking at that and I'm saying the government, the military, Nixon, everyone said, Jesus, we go through with this, all of that's going to come out. Are they afraid of that if they were to bring in the end Julian here and there's a long trial and everything is recapitulated that he unveiled back in 2010?
Well, I'll make a speculation here. I think that the people who have chosen to prosecute him and to try to extradite him would be very happy if he died in prison, which is not an unlikely event, actually, in this conditions of that prison, virtual isolation, the COVID possibilities that are there, and the effect of, as John said, of 14 years, essentially, of confinement, not just the 3 years here, on him, that they would be glad if he became non corpus mentis, if he broke down in some way or died. The question of the controls on the trial, their desire not to share too much with the American public, the prosecution in my case concluded later, I'm sure, it leaked out, that a mistake had been made really to bring the Espionage Act charges against me, which did allow the actual content of the papers to be discussed in the court, and should have just concentrated on theft, which again would be unprecedented, charging me with theft for just copying materials, not actually taking it. But anyway, it does bring back to me, though, something I rarely commented on. I don't think I've ever told it. It's just a detail of how the trial started from our point of view. Remember that this information had all become published. It was top secret. It was labeled top secret, but it had been published at this point. The government continued to regard it as classified for 40 years. They didn't declassify until the 40th anniversary of the publication of what had been put out earlier. But when we went into the courtroom, I will remember, we're confronted with great screens between the press, which took most of the seats in the courtroom, and the jury and the judge. Big screens which were, in fact, for slides. And their intention of the prosecution was to show this, quote, top secret or actually public information to the jury and the judge on these screens. And we were seeing the back of the screens, meaning the press couldn't see it entirely. And I thought it was so absurd. The judge did say on this, down with those, that's ridiculous. It made me think I'm dealing here with sinister buffoons. Basically, this is almost a caricature of their behavior. But it comes down to what you're saying. No, they cannot be anxious at all to see the material that Julian actually exposed, presented once more to the public and brought to their attention. In fact, they have included that collateral murder clip in the materials that he's still being prosecuted for, 20 years later. And what you are seeing on the screen that he's presenting is evidence of American war crimes, which he didn't have clips of people being tortured. By the way, remember that the CIA deliberately, in obstruction of justice, clearly criminal obstruction of justice, destroyed the tapes that they had of people being tortured so that Congress couldn't see those, the public couldn't see those. But here you do have a case of unarmed non-combatants including 2 Reuters journalists, and people who are trying to rescue or injure the injured, being shot down in front of your eyes. I don't see how they can avoid that being shown in court, and it won't do the American government any good. And as you pointed out, Randy, of course, the people doing that shooting were not prosecuted, not investigated, and one of the people in their unit said, of the helicopter gunships, said afterwards, this was a daily occurrence. This was something that happened. You're seeing what happens in war, the kinds of crimes that happen in war.
We only saw part. We only saw part of it. Now, guys, we only got 10 minutes left. What you had? Not only were you able to the public see what had been going on.
Yeah, I think what you said is that how it just like the trial is an exposure of how we are being governed, and it's similar in Julian's case. Like Julian's persecution is it's like another WikiLeaks revelation. Like at every step along the way, the CIA spying on Julian in the embassy, on his lawyers, on his psychologists. The plot to
which, by the way, remember that was when it came out that I had been illegally wiretapped without a warrant, warrantless wiretap. That efforts had been made actually to, quote, incapacitate me. That kind of information is what led to the dropping of charges in my trial. They should lead automatically to the cancellation of this trial in Julian's case, the revelation that there were conversations about assassinating him. And meanwhile, totally illegal surveillance of him going on in his discussions with his lawyers and his doctors and everybody else. Of course, that, as in my case, it did lead when it came out. Well, it's come out in this case. Why is the case still going on?
And that formed part of Nixon's impeachment in the end, didn't it? I remember you telling me that.
Definitely.
That was...
Oh, absolutely. That was what. It was the revelation of those actions that figured in the impeachment proceedings that led to Nixon's resignation, and that war would not have ended under Nixon. He had to be out. People thought that the war was over, but what was over was American ground involvement. He'd taken the troops out, but he had every intention of renewing, as soon as they were out, I mean within weeks, renewing the air war, and the reason indefinitely. How long could that have gone on? Well, it would be a war like Afghanistan, where American troops weren't dying, but American planes were involved, no prisoners. And so that went on 20 years in Afghanistan. So it could have gone on indefinitely like that in Vietnam as well. I'll end with that.
Yes. All right. Listen, guys, we only have 5 or 6 minutes left, but we have a gentleman that is at Harvard tomorrow. Merrick Garland is given the commencement ceremony tomorrow morning at 8:30. And a young peace activist here, Michael, who's Michael Miccioli, I believe, a fellow Italian-American, is a class of 2022 at Harvard, and he is leading a protest tomorrow to protest Merrick Garland's prosecution. Good evening, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Yes. All right. So tell us what inspired you to get to be there tomorrow, and your thoughts about the persecution of Julian.
Yeah. So tomorrow, May 29th, from 8 to 10:30 a.m. is the class of 20 and class of 21's Harvard commencement, which had been delayed due to COVID. And the commencement speaker is Attorney General Merrick Garland, who is leading this prosecution and this extradition. And one of the main reasons that I wanted to organize this event, in addition to all of the reasons that you've all discussed so far, is that Merrick Garland is also an alum. He's a class of 74 alum and Harvard Law class of 77. So not only is Garland being invited to speak at Harvard's biggest event this year, not only is he the type of person who they're inviting, but he's also the type of person that Harvard University has produced. So in reality, Harvard should be feeling embarrassed that their alum is leading this political persecution, yet they're bringing him to speak and essentially glorifying him.
How do you feel about that, Gabriel, that we now have students involved in this movement?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think, it's I think the movement's growing and people are seeing the injustice and what the persecution of Julian means to everyone. So, I think it's great.
Well, I have another angle on that. I am Harvard 52. So this graduation would be my 70th reunion. Big deal, and the last official reunion. And I would have planned to be there actually for it, except for the COVID. I didn't want to travel and so forth. But I'm delighted to hear that some Harvard students, thank you so much, have picked up on this subject. I suppose you're aware, but just possibly not, that there's a Harvard law professor, Yochai Benkler. Are you familiar with him? Do you know, is he part of this action, or have you gotten in touch with him?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Well, let me tell you quickly, the reason I mention him is that he's written a number of articles as an authority on the need for a public interest defense in the case of whistleblowing, the case of leaking, and has pointed out that the Espionage Act absolutely has no possibility for arguing public interest, need to know, that the public needs to know. As in my case, with the same charges as Julian, I was not allowed to answer questions even as to why I had copied the Pentagon Papers. I wasn't able to tell the jury that because the Espionage Act is a strict liability act where motivation, intention is not an element of the defense. So Benkler has very strongly argued for this, and I urge you tonight or tomorrow to raise this issue. I don't even know what his attitude is specifically on Julian, but there's no question that all the arguments he has made as a Harvard law professor, that the prosecution under the Espionage Act as it stands is wrong, unconstitutional. I don't put words in his mouth, but that's how I read what he's saying. And that we do need to change the law on this case to allow people like Julian and Snowden and Chelsea and all of the others who have been prevented, as I was prevented, from even presenting to the jury why we did what we did and what the public benefit was to be. So Garland, let me just guess that Garland, for all his law background, doesn't know much about this because I was the first such case, so judges knew basically nothing about it. There'd never been a case like that. Well, now there have been a dozen or more, but no Supreme Court has addressed the constitutionality of this case or the need for a public interest defense. Yeah, they haven't accepted appeals. So it would be very good to bring the Harvard Law School into this issue tomorrow. Don't have a lot of time.
Guys, I'm going to take, we're going to get some concluding remarks by everybody. I want to take a quick break. This is, I hope I don't get in trouble for playing Shostakovich, but we're going to play Sweet by Shostakovich, and we'll come back and get some concluding statements from everybody here. I'm Randy Critico. This is Randy Critico live on the fly. We are talking to Michael Miccioli. Is that it? Did I pronounce it right? And Gabriel Shipton, the producer of Ithaka, and of course the legendary whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg. We'll be right back with some concluding remarks from all three of these individuals. I just heard some FBI agents knocking on my door that I violated some kind of sanctions by playing Shostakovich. All right, we're back with some concluding remarks. I'm going to go to you, Gabriel, first about the movie. Your projection of what's going to happen here this week or the next week with Patel, and what formula do you have for us to move forward from this point?
Well, we're expecting Priti Patel to sign off on the extradition order, which Julian still has another chance to appeal to the High Court, but his last application to appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected in the UK. So we're inching closer and closer to an extradition to the US. My father and I are traveling to the USA. Yes. Next month.
How close are we?
We've got an event at the People's Summit in Los Angeles at the Trade Technical College on the 10th of June. So that's the first one we've got locked in. So if you want to come, if you're on the East Coast, come down and say hi. West Coast, come down and say hello. I guess everywhere we go around the world, we're asking people to contact their representatives, and let them know how much what this case means to them, what Julian's persecution means to them. Get involved. Democracy doesn't happen on its own. It needs us to make it work. And so we have to do that. We have to get involved.
And young man, the class of 2022 graduate, Michael Miccioli, your thoughts here going forward?
Once again, we'll be out there from 8 to 10:30 a.m. at the intersection of Mass Ave and Holyoke Street tomorrow. And we hope to make Garland really think about this case and whether he wants this to be his legacy going forward. Whether he wants.
You're going to continue to organize after this, no matter what, right?
Correct.
All right. And Daniel, I'm going to let you have whatever time. Give us.
I just want to say to Mike how very happy I am to hear. And in fact, it makes me realize if I'd known this was going to happen tomorrow, I would have come. There would be a reason to take a long air trip now, despite the COVID. I was Harvard EA 70 years ago, and an MA and a PhD. I was in the Society of Fellows earlier, advocate, Crimson, so long Harvard background there. And I haven't seen all that much that has made me proud of that, actually, in later years. McGeorge Bundy, the dean of faculty at Harvard, presiding over the heaviest bombing in history, almost 4 World War IIs. Kissinger, professor from Harvard. I do look back on Harvard to a large extent, retrospectively, and my education as well, as having been a trade school for the empire, basically, for manning and now feminizing the empire, and not having that. So I'm so happy to hear that there are students, as in 1968-69, during the war, who are raising these issues and dealing with in support of the Constitution, which is what Merrick Garland and all these others swore to support and defend. And the extradition of Julian Assange is hardly an act of supporting our Constitution with its amendments. We have these originalists now in the Federal Society and so forth who want to go back to the original Constitution without its amendments, I would say, without the Bill of Rights, pretty much, except for the Second Amendment, of course. And so Harvard, I don't know what you're going to do from now on, but you're getting a great start to your career, and I applaud you for it. Thank you.
Right. All right. And finally, about Julian Assange, I want to get your final thoughts about this case coming up.
Me?
Mr. Ellsberg, yes.
Well, you know what I've been saying right along, that in the case of Julian in particular, all the other cases have been, I believe, unconstitutionally, but in any case, have been of officials or former officials who were sources, as I was, to a newspaper or to the media. And in this case now, as the Civil Liberties Union predicted long ago that Trump would do, bring a case against a journalist, publisher in this case of Assange, like the New York Times or an editor. And they predicted he would do it, and he did do it, which Obama had declined to do, the Obama Justice Department. Biden now is doing as badly as Trump on this. If what rides on this is not just the fate of this one man, Julian Assange, who did take on the empire very much, and the empire strikes back, as the movie said. In other words, he really was exposing the criminality and the terrible, dangerous policies as stupid a crime as the invasion of Ukraine, and exposing this to the public. And of course, I don't know whether he did expect, but you might say he shouldn't have expected that they would refrain from using every means unconstitutional to punish him, to make an example. That's already happened from his years now in confinement. But if he should be extradited and prosecuted, and I think in the current climate, very likely that the unconstitutionality of his prosecution would not protect him. And as I say, it is not his fate that is the main thing there, the continuation of his current confinement, but it is the very possibility of a free press. And two things on that. Russia went through, under Gorbachev in his last days, a period of what they called glasnost, openness, that actually was, we were seeing revelations then of the past Soviet practices that we had never seen such openness in a way in this country. And that went on for a number of years. It's clearly been closing down, but still there was an independent press until now. Right now, we're seeing what could happen in this country or any other country that wants to be free. What has happened in the evolution of Hungary, of Poland, of Slovakia, and others, and many other countries, including Britain, with its new legislation against whistleblowing, basically. When Randy mentioned his joke about Shostakovich, I actually didn't get it at first. I was thinking, what does he mean? You know, if it's all right to play Shostakovich. I really didn't think what you're referring to. And then I did right away. He's Russian, playing Russian music? Well, we're not allowing Russia to compete in the international cat conferences, not festivals right now, competitions. Incredible things are going down. They're shutting down places on the grounds that they present the Russian point of view. Well, what the hell? We're supposed to be able to hear anything here. What does freedom of the press and freedom of thought here, freedom of speech mean if you cannot hear what people are saying, whether you agree with it or not? So you're quite right. Just as it was in World War I, even before my time, that Frankfurters and Wieners became hot dogs. I don't know if any of you even know that, but you couldn't refer to.
I'm a vegetarian.
What? You couldn't refer to anything German. And of course, during the Iraq War, our criminal war against Iraq, the French, to their credit, were not supporting it. And the Germans, and so French fries became freedom fries, and there were congressmen. I don't know if Mike even knows that. Let me ask: Did you know that phenomenon? You know,
just born there.
What the hell? It's 20 years ago, practically. So I don't know how old you were. Yes, you're absolutely right. Shostakovich could be banned at this point. We have to oppose that. Fight for our liberties, and Julian's case is at the van of those cases right now, not just as a cultural practice, but as actual shutdown of our freedom of press. And my God, as Randy says, the day could come, and not far off, when even it's hard to believe, and yet we're getting it. Russian music. By the way, in World War I, German music, Bach, Beethoven, taken off the concert. So that kind of insanity is going to keep this war going indefinitely. If I'm afraid I believe this administration would be happy to see this war continue as long as they can. Because there is no downside to it in its present form. I don't think that Biden or anybody else wants to see a nuclear war, but they're prepared to gamble with it to keep this war going and to avoid negotiations, because it's wonderful for the military-industrial complex, and it's wonderful for the American leadership in a totally anachronistic until now, alliance, NATO. It needed a rationale, and they took, I think they're very happy with the rationale they have now. So we have the phenomenon that Henry Kissinger, who I mentioned, a Harvard graduate, who, yes, he is a war criminal, of course, and a mass murderer, along with his boss, Nixon. But he's not always wrong. And when he called for negotiations at Davos, of all places, on last Sunday, Monday, echoing a New York Times editorial that called for negotiations on Sunday, the day before, I'm just reading today that Henry Kissinger is being denounced as an appeaser of a Hitler-like dictator. At Munich, the word Munich is being widely said right now, and he's being denounced, even by Zelensky, I have to say, which I'm very sorry to say. when Zelensky says, who is acting heroically now, and he's recognized as such as a world figure right now, and appropriately, but when he says now, this week, in answering Kissinger's call for negotiations, that the war will continue until the last Russian soldier is removed from Crimea, that is pre-2014, and from the Donbass, he's asking for an indefinite war. Now, as a Ukrainian and as a leader, elected leader, he can speak, let's say, he's talking about calling for the annihilation of his people, basically. In terms of victory, that victory is not going to happen. The Russians are not going to leave Crimea, period. And the Donbass is something to be negotiated about. But to say no negotiation on that, these terms are now incumbent, that's calling for indefinite war. And Lockheed, Raytheon, and Boeing, and Saab in Sweden, and a lot of others, that's good news for them. Their stock has gone up enormously in the last 3 months. And rightly so. If investors have no scruples about what they're investing in, then war arms manufacturers are a good investment for them.
Just like Krupp was back in 1939.
Absolutely.
All right.
So anyway, I'm saying the voice for negotiations need to be heard, and you can't allow it to be stigmatized as giving a Russian. Actually, the Russians aren't calling for negotiation here any better than Biden is at this point, or Zelensky. So it's got to be other people in the world, other than these three leaders at the moment, who say, this war must end before it escalates, must end before it leads to mass starvation in many parts of the world because of the blockades that are going on, and before it leads to the annihilation of the Ukrainian people.
Right. All right. Well, on that note, I agree with you. I have mixed feelings about this guy Zelensky. I agree about Kissinger. I couldn't believe it. First time in my life I agreed with Henry Kissinger. And maybe I can start doing his voice again since I do impressions. It must go in before they come out. All right. But I'd rather do my Nixon, and there is Daniel Ellsberg, and we're going to get you. All right, my fellow Americans. I want to thank all three of you. I got to go back to you, Mr. Shipton. The film Ithaka, as we get out here. The film Ithaka, it's going to be on ABC in Australia this week in 2 parts, I believe, Wednesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, 7th of June. Tuesday, 7th of June, 8:30 East Coast Australia time.
Okay.
And good luck to you, Michael, tomorrow. And you can give Garland a message from his fellow Harvard alumnus, Daniel Ellsberg.
All right. All right. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank especially the one you don't see here, Kelly Lane out of North Carolina, who puts all the videos together, and she's patiently engineering and having to deal with me at this point in time and some of my internet problems. We are going to go out now with your good buddy there, Daniel. This is The Bar by the great Roger Waters. We'll see you next week, folks. I'm Randy Credico. Randy Credico live on the fly here on Assange Countdown to Freedom.
Does everybody in the bar feel shaky? Lord knows I do. I guess we all feel pretty much the same. Kinda wore out by this crazy fucking zoo. The smell of napalm with the cornflakes, the chafe of killing everything that breathes, imposing sanctions on the lady down the street. Till she takes the hint and packs her bags and leaves. Come on in here, sister, and set a spell. You are most welcome in the bar. We may seem few, but we are many. Have you been traveling for? The girl who brought you in here is Lakota from Standing Rock, where they made their stand. So from Fort Yates, North Dakota, here's a message for the man. Would you kindly get the fuck off our land?